Welcome to the very first Improve Your Landscape Photography Members Image Review. Here's our first image. We have a monochrome or black and white of a ruined castle on a hill line. We have some trees that are silhouetted for us, clouds moving overhead, and the stars up above. So compositionally, it's really nice. The castle is placed on the right third, and not only on the right third but also on the intersection of the bottom right thirds, which is a very powerful place to place a focal point in an image. The exposure on the castle is really nice. I don't know whether it's been lightened slightly in post-processing, whether it's natural, or whether indeed some form of artificial illumination has been applied to it at the time, like a torch shone over the castle. But if it is, it's been very well done and very nicely handled indeed. We see the stars are rendered as pinpoints of light rather than as trails of light. So obviously the photographer has chosen a focal length and a shutter speed which allows that to happen. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that at this time. That's going to be for another video on exposing for stars and star trails. But the photographer's done really well with that. One thing I also like is the way the clouds are moving through the sky. If we take a look at the movement and we have a look, we can see the movement of these clouds overhead is towards the castle, and we can see the lines here on the left hand side, they're also moving towards the castle. So that's giving us an added lead in to focus our eyes on what the photographer wants us to look at in this image. I'll just remove those marks. So that's very nice as well. So there's an awful lot to like about this image. There's a couple of points I would like to say. I think this bright area in the sky here, I find that very distracting. It actually competes for my attention with the castle. It might be some light pollution from a distant town. It could be something to do with the moon or the setting sun. I don't know what it is, but that's something to be aware of. And also, I'm not too keen on this rendering as total black down in the bottom. I think we could do something with that as well. In video 2, I'll give you a few ideas of things you can try to try and take this image up a notch or two. But thank you very much for sending it in. It's a lovely image and I'm sure everybody's enjoyed looking at it. Right, let's take a look at our second image. Again, we've got a very nice photograph. We have a cross here on a hillside. Obviously it's over winter somewhere. Snow still on the ground. Clouds dark and gloomy, apart from a patch of blue up in the right corner. I want to know what this cross is all about. It's something I've not seen before, but obviously somebody's gone to a lot of trouble to make sure that it still stands up. They've put steel bands around it and propped it up with rods. So there's obviously a story behind it, and I want to know what that story is. So if you're the photographer, can you maybe drop me an email and let me know? So once again, the photographer has used the rule of thirds to place the cross on the right third, which is a strong point, as we mentioned in the last photograph. We can look out beyond the cross on the left hand side of it, out to a reservoir and a hill beyond. So quite a nice composition. I think you can actually improve upon it, and if you watch the second video I'm going to put out, then I'll give you a few hints of why I think it can actually be improved, this composition. So what can we actually say about this photograph? Well, it's very sharp. I actually think it's probably a little bit too sharp. The cross is very nice. Let me just, the detail on the cross is very nice. But also we have a very, very sharp background and the houses here. Probably a little bit too sharp to what I would expect. So that's something that maybe I'll include a video on sometime in the future. If we were stood there, this would obviously be sharp to our eyes, the cross, but as things get further away, they wouldn't actually be as sharp as that. But that's a minor point. Something else, I think you've actually lightened parts of the image quite considerably. It's fairly flat and evenly illuminated. This hillside here really does look as though you've done some work on it to bring some detail back in there. Don't be worried about shadow in your images. It does help to give a 3D quality. At the moment it's looking very flat in terms of tone, so that's something just to watch out for, but it is a lovely image. Our eyes are normally drawn to the brightest part of an image, which, you know, the snow's quite bright here, but there's only small parts of it. This up here in the top right hand corner is an area that my eye keeps going to. If I just remove that. Very quickly, I've just cloned a bit of the sky in, and we can see what a difference it does make. Without it, our eyes go straight to this part of the image up here. Without it, our eye tends to be focused more around here. So maybe we could wait for a bit better cloud patterns, maybe even work to enhance the detail that we do have in the sky. But that's a very nice image, and thanks for sending it in. So on to our third image. Here we have a shot of Castlerigg Stone Circle up in the Lake District. Obviously one morning, sun just peeping over the hill there, stones in the foreground. Very nice. I can see the photographer's actually thought about what he wants to achieve here and has tried to take the images to accomplish that vision. I actually think this is two images stuck together, or one image processed in two separate ways. I think your processing's letting you down a bit here. Let's tell you what I mean. The foreground is lovely, not a problem with that. The background is very nice, it gives us a feeling of a misty morning. But we have a few processing issues. Let's take the sky first of all. We have a darker area just on the left edge there, and we have this dark patch here up in the top right corner. So a bit of imbalance there. This dark area on the left hand side actually does come all the way down, but it's not as noticeable on the grass as it is up here in the sky. So that's one area we've got there. I'll just clear my guides away. The second, we have this line of foreground here, but then just above it we have this bright area which seems to follow that kind of area. So we can see this area here has been overly brightened. So you've either taken one image, lightened the foreground, tried to darken the back, and then relighten this. So it's that imbalance between the background and the foreground that causes me to think that it might be two images. There's also, if we look here, slight discoloration above or around some of the stones. I think you've tried to attempt something that's very difficult there, so I can only give you credit for doing that. But we do have these telltale signs in the image which, to the experienced eye, will tell us that you have had a bit of processing on this one. It's also a very difficult composition. We have areas of the stones that overlap. This little area, you know, there's not a lot we can do about this, but these areas here, you know, stones that overlap. I have tried photographing this myself quite a few times, and you really need a ladder to get high and look down on them to give yourself some separation here. I'll also give you a few ideas in my second video of things to try, compositions to try. I think it shows us all you've had to think about the image, you've decided in your mind what you want to produce, and you've gone out to try and produce that. So really well done. That's the way to improve. Just need to work on your processing now. Right, let's move on to the fourth image. Again, I know where this one is. We're up in the Isle of Skye at the Kerrang. Sunrise looking out over the landscape to the rising sun. Beautiful image. Photographer's obviously got up early in the morning, gone out, and despite many of the compositions up on the Kerrang, he's chosen, or she's chosen, to look out to sea. I've got a feeling this is an HDR image. It does look a little bit flat, and that's one of the things with HDR images. It does take a bit of the contrast out, and we've got to work hard in processing to put that back in. See the sun down here on the foreground, it's beautiful, just little patches of light and shadow, also on the distant hillside and in the landscape. Absolutely lovely. The photographer stood at the side of the road and used this little ridge to frame the image. And we've got some lovely clouds in the sky and a really bright sun. It does show us a few of the problems shooting into the sun. We do need a really clean lens and really clean filters if we're going to use filters. And we also run the risk of getting all lens flare, and we can see lots of little bits of flare in the image there. There are a couple of ways around that, and I will show you in video 2 how we can work to try and minimise these areas of flare. Right, let's have a look at the composition. We've spoken about this ridge at the bottom. If I put the rule of thirds up, I've drawn a grid there, and we can see that the horizon is in the middle sections. It's not down on the bottom third or the top third. Now these are only guides, they're not rules, they're just guides and can help to make our composition look a little bit more balanced. So the way it's standing at the moment, as a viewer, are we looking at these beautiful clouds, or are we looking at the ground, or are we looking at both? I don't know what it was that the photographer was wanting to show me. If we maybe crop this down a bit so the composition becomes a little bit more in line with the rule of thirds, and we crop some of those clouds out on the top to about there. Does that make it a stronger image? We've now got a little row of cloud here, but there's no doubt that the photographer is wanting us to look at the ground and the land and the way the light is playing, casting light and shadow on this land. I think that's probably a stronger composition for myself. What do you think? Now, I said before about HDR can tend to flatten an image. Here it is, and I just did a little bit of processing to put some of that contrast back in. Now I think that really is a lot more in keeping with how the photographer probably saw it, with that bright sun casting bright areas on the landscape, and there'll be deep shadow behind. As you can see here, all I've done is a few curve layers to increase the contrast in various areas, brought a bit more detail out back up in the dark cliffs there, and just added a little bit more saturation into the highlights. I think that makes it a stronger image. For next time, maybe just try and get the whole of this little lochen in view here. There's a little bit that we've just cut off there, and I think shows maybe that we haven't been as careful as we might have been with our composition. So maybe a few more feet to the left and make sure we can all see the end of that little locken. But spectacular place to go and photograph. You've done a really good job. And watch the second video and I'll show you how we can try and remove some of those items of flair. But thank you. Right, on to image number 5. Judging by the name, Llyn Idfal, it's somewhere in Wales. Taken on a very stormy day, snow still on the hills there, the clouds billowing over the mountain tops, very atmospheric. You can almost feel that, can't you? Photographers used what appears to be quite a fast shutter speed because we have what does look like little raindrops dimpling the water over here. So he's resisted, or she's resisted, the temptation to go for a long shutter speed to smooth out the water. They've used this promontory of land here as foreground interest, which I think is really nice. We have the water on both sides, this little river coming down here. Beautiful image. The whole image has atmosphere about it, which is what we're looking to convey in our photographs. Now there are a couple of issues for me that we need to look at. Once again, like one of the other images, I think it's been over sharpened. The grass here is very sharp and gritty. Not as big a problem as the sharpness here in the cloud covered mountains. With the clouds coming over, you'd expect them to be soft, and yet these are really quite sharp edges there. Maybe the photographer's been a little bit exuberant with their sharpening. So just watch that. These hills wouldn't be as sharp as that to the eye. Now the other thing is the image seems to be on a slant. It seems to be falling down that way. If I just remove my mark, have a look at it. Now I'm not sure. I don't think it's an optical illusion. I actually think the camera may not have been straight. If we just rotate it, I've had a little play, and about 1.2 degrees clockwise seems to make it a bit more balanced and a bit level. If I just crop off the excess bits of the canvas following our rotation and take another look at it, I think it does start to look a lot more level in this area. But that shouldn't detract from what is a superb photograph, and it's another one that makes me want to jump in the car and drive to this part of Wales and take some photographs around here for myself. So really well done. Thank you for sharing it with us, and maybe post it again but without the sharpness on the hills there, because I'm sure plenty of other members in the group would love to see that one. Thank you. Okay, moving on to image number 6. Another night scene. Looks as though we're probably up on the west coast of Scotland somewhere. Photographers waited till it's gone very dark. Obviously, I think they were probably captivated by these lights out in the distance. So we've got the colours of the sunset, a fairly long exposure to smooth out the waters of the sea, and it's let all the rocks and these little islands go into silhouette. So I do like the colours in it, if a little saturated, but that's not too much of an issue. Let's just bring up our guides to have a look at the thirds. We can see the brightest part of our image is almost smack on the centre line there. once we forget about the bright lights in the distance, this area here becomes the brightest part of our image. Or whether it's a good idea to have that area as the brightest part, let me show you what happens if I just crop down to the rules of thirds there, and we put the horizon on the top third. We see our image becomes very small, very dark, very overpowering. Our only light is the light on the ship or the oil rig out in the distance. So I'm not too sure whether we should apply the rule of thirds to this particular image. One thing that does bother me though is the amount of silhouette we have here. There's an enormous amount of it. No detail whatsoever. It does overpower the image, unfortunately. I just remove those. If we're going to go down that route, then I suggest that we make sure we have separation between all these different objects. We have the separation there, but this section here, it just gets all confusing. I don't know where one island ends and another begins. So overall, it is a nice image. You've got this light here in the distance, which is really nice, and it really draws the eye in. But I think, for my tastes, we have far too much silhouette. A small bit of silhouette, yes, but not extending all the way across the image here without any breaks in it. It just gets a little bit overpowering. But thank you for sending that one in. Okay, let's move on to our final image, titled Thirlwall Castle. So we have not quite a square format. The photographer's chosen to get down low, which I really like. We're looking along this pathway which curls round, and then we can see it back round the tree and obviously goes off round the side of the castle. I think that's a really nice compositional lead in to have there. We've also got the shadows of the fence there, and the fence posts leading down the left to almost contain our eye where the photographer wants us to look. On the right side we have this big old tree, the side of a shed, and I think that's really good because that shed's obviously getting a lot of sunlight. If the photographer had been any further to the left, that would have just been too bright and too large and too dominant in the frame. So by moving to the right hand side, the photographer has quite cleverly reduced the size of it and reduced its visual impact. And we are looking up at the castle, although we can't see a lot of it, to be honest. It is titled Thirlwall Castle, but it forms a very small part of the composition. There's an awful lot of tree in it, which is giving the impression that that's what the photograph is about. There's also a bit of a bright area here on the right hand side, which kind of attracts my attention away from the castle. I think this is a prime candidate for a bit of cropping. Let's have a look. Let's overlay our guides. So as we see there, the bottom third is quite a way above the horizon there. The castle straddles 2 points, and there's almost 2/3 given over to the tree. Let's just have a look at what happens if we play about with our rules of thirds. Let's start to bring it down, and let's see if we can get the castle in the middle third. So would that make for a stronger composition? Well, with branches in trees, you want to be very careful of cutting them off in an unnatural position. So I'm going to look for a branch that is quite close to where I want to crop my image, and we have this branch just here. So that is the branch I'm going to use as a guide when I bring my crop down. So I'm going to make sure that is at the top of my frame, and let's see what that looks like now. Well, I think it's improved, it's focused a bit more attention on the castle, but now our image is a little bit too wide. So let's undo that, and let's go for a square crop, a 1:1. And let's bring this down to the same place, which is there. And then let's come across and see if we can crop out that bright area just to the right of the tree. So let's come to here, bring that down. Still looking for that branch at the top there, and that's a nice compromise. So let's have a crop there. So we can see now that the castle has become more central in our frame. We have reduced the impact of the tree, so it's not competing for our attention as much. We've left the relationship of this stone barn the same, and we still have our lead-in line going round the corner there. So just playing about with the crop can actually help our images tremendously. So yes, a very nice image there, and thanks for sending it in and letting me waffle on about cropping. So that's the end of our very first image review. I hope you've enjoyed it. There'll be a part 2 coming out shortly where I'll just talk about some little tips and tricks that we can actually do on the images we've discussed to improve them and take them up to the next level. So that'll be in a few weeks' time. So thanks for watching, and if you liked it, then give us a tick on Facebook. Bye.